Rock isn't dead. It's in flux.
Hi everyone, I'm Britt with Rock and Flux, and I'm joined today by Sean from the band TRAITRS, and we're going to talk about them and what they have going on today. So Sean, I appreciate you being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So let's talk about your band TRAITRS and kind of how you all got started. I always like to kind of get that out of the way first. So kind of about how you formed and up until, where you all are today.
So I play synths in TRAITRS. So I met the other Sean. We're two Seans, the TRAITRS.
Yes.
So I met the other Sean through some friends. We bonded over similar tastes in music and film and art. And he was playing in some bands around the time that I was finishing university. The timing was just correct because his projects were kind of not doing so well. So then he asked if I wanted to start working with him. From that point, we just started learning how to run music software and kind of teaching us how to, run music programs, how to, sequence things and whatnot. So that took a long time. And then by about, I'd say 2015 is kind of when we estimate our, formal starting as TRAITRS. We were recording in 2014 with our producer, Josh Carodi, who we work with to this day. And it wasn't until we wrote Witch Trials in late 2015 that it kind of felt like we had a direction that we could follow. I think we were kind of hunting for something before. Then we put our first cassette out on a local boutique label in Toronto called Pleasance Records. We put that out in 2016. And then, that's kind of how we started.
So just let's clarify, because it is funny. You're both named Sean, but you all spell your name differently.
Yeah, so I have a very
right?
Irish name, Sean-Patrick Nolan, and the singer Sean is the A-W way of spelling. So we have many arguments about what's the correct spelling.
I mean, in some ways, at least you do spell it differently because at least it gives you some differentiation from you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Every little bit helps, but it's very helpful at shows because everybody always remembers the show. It's like it's very, it's easy.
So in 2017, you all released Rites and Rituals, right? Was that an EP?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like a long EP. Okay. It's 7 songs. It's half an hour. It was on a cassette only. It was a cassette and digital release. Okay. So yeah, I guess it's technically an EP. You could argue it's the first full length, I guess, kind of like, it's hard to say. At that point, we were really unsure if people wanted to hear music like we were making or if people even really cared. So we were literally starting from scratch at that point. So we were still kind of testing the waters with just knowing that we really like this music that we were creating, but I'm not sure if it's going to really land with people because it's hard to kind of get attention as it always is in the digital music making age. So yeah, 2017 is when we put it out. And from there, it opened a lot of other doors for us.
Let me ask you this. Why did you choose cassette and digital instead of a vinyl record?
Yeah, well, I think it speaks to the fact that we really had no following and we really had no fans whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And it was just a practical, it's the cheapest physical format to make. And it was kind of a low key investment for James Lindsay from Pleasance Records to make. So it was kind of let's use this it's like a litmus test to see if there's even interest in what you guys are doing to begin with. That's kind of why. So we eventually put out a vinyl version of that cassette. But yeah, it was kind of weird. But also, there's a really cool cassette making shop in Toronto, and they do really cool designs. So there's a lot of neat artwork you can do and art direction you can do with cassettes. So yeah, it was cool, and it's a novelty. Everybody kind of gets a pop out of seeing tapes at the merch booth. So we still make cassettes to this day. It's kind of it's easy. People can just slide them in their pocket. You can support without spending a lot of money.
Do you find that people like having that fit? I always talk about, because we obviously have to in today's music world, it's like streaming and all the digital components of music today. But, there is some value, I think, in having some sort of physical copy of something.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so often now that it's okay, vinyl. You don't really hear a whole lot about cassette tapes.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And it's especially now with all the major labels putting such a strain on the vinyl printing presses. Even more so, I've been reading some articles about CDs maybe having a resurgence for a similar thing because it's a cheap alternative for independent artists to kind of make cool, and then the mainstream will kind of jump on like they did with vinyl. I could definitely see that happening with other physical copies. But I mean, I think I see, when I'm talking to people at our merch booth at shows, I'm listening to what they're liking and what they're kind of reacting to.
Yeah.
And it's always, the cassettes always get a reaction, but not everybody might buy one, but it gets people to kind of stop and look again. And so, I don't know, like Sean and I love physical, art that you can still actually have, and it's tactile and tangible, and you can, it hits differently when you're looking at this art. Sean does all of our art direction and creates it all himself, and he puts a lot of effort. There's usually a lot of layers to it, and it's just kind of nice to be able to appreciate it in person in your own hands, as opposed to just seeing a JPEG on your phone all the time.
There's like a nostalgic component to it too, because technically I'm a millennial. So our age group, right? I think we're very interesting because we get the technology and we grew up with some of it, but we didn't grow up with all of it. So we still had VCRs, we still had tape. I went through the phase of having to listen to the song on the radio to get it onto a tape to hear it later. You know what I mean? And I think that there is a certain level of nostalgia to that too, because you really had to commit to what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, totally. Sean and I were rehearsing the other day, and we were in the Uber on the way over, and I was talking about that because I was a child of the late 90s, so Korn was my favorite band. And I remember when the song Here to Stay came out, I had to wait. They premiered it on the radio at midnight, and I stayed up so I could tape it on a cassette so I could just listen to it on repeat. This is like, the earliest forms of like, Napster was just kind of coming around. So that's an interesting transition period. And you're right. I've been talking to some friends of mine that are a similar age about what you mentioned, and it's true. We're kind of half in and half out. Right. And it's funny when I talk to young people now, because they're like, oh my God, like you remember what it's like just to be able to listen to things on CD only? Like, whoa, it was so weird. Like, it's such a trip, because to me, it's like, it's like whatever. I remember having to cram 4 or 5 CDs into my front pocket.
Oh yeah, I still have the old book of all of them.
Yeah, totally.
And I was a no-metal kid myself, so I totally get, that whole scene, and yeah. Yeah,
I used to be embarrassed about it, but now I'm kind of like, I'm okay.
I think there were some great bands that came out of that, and they're still, a good amount of them are still doing their thing today, so there's got to be something to it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I saw, and they were like gateway bands back then. Like, they would always reference, like, I remember the singer of Korn, Jonathan Davis, would always mention, like, Duran Duran in interviews and, like, new wave music that he liked. And it was kind of like, I would always kind of hear that and go, like, oh, maybe I should, like, check that out or something. Right. It was kind of like having a recommended listen, before that technology was really a thing.
Okay, so after Rites and Rituals in 2018, your first, I guess this would be considered like your first major release was Butcher, if I can not butcher the word, Butcher's Coin.
Yeah, you got it. All right.
So can you tell me about that? So, like some of the songs I really liked on that particular album were like Thin Flesh and Suffering of Spiders, which are actually very different songs, but I think they're both very good. And I think that Suffering with Spiders was cool because it's like the Sisters of Mercy sound, but also like The Cure, like maybe like in their pornography phase or whatever. So can you tell me kind of about that record?
We actually, what's interesting about Thin Flesh is we wrote that about a week or 2 weeks after we finished recording Rites and Rituals. So this would have been in 2017. We hadn't even played our first show as TRAITRS yet at that time. So we had about a month before the show and the release for Rites and Rituals. So we felt like we didn't have to really start rehearsing just yet. So we were still kind of juiced up after coming out of the studio. So we decided to start writing. And Thin Flesh was one of the first things that we kind of came up with. Some songs you write and then you kind of like immediately you're like, oh, this has like juice to it. Like there's something in it, even in a really sketched out kind of form. It was like, there's something in it. I think something with the melody Sean was singing and whatnot. But we wrote both of those songs pretty shortly after. And it's like Sean and I like to play the game of like, with influences and certain things of like, trying to see how we can play with them or use them in a context with what Sean's maybe singing about or writing. It's like, it's fun to us to play with those influences and try to find new ways of expressing some of the emotional things that they were expressing with that music. We like to call it like capturing the spirit of those old bands and just trying to, find our own voice in it.
And who are your influences? Like, I know what I hear in them, but I'm always interested to see if like you all have that same perspective.
Yeah, like we both, like Sean and I have similar tastes and we have very different tastes too. But I guess like when we first started, it would be the early Cure records. Dead Can Dance a lot, the first two Dead Can Dance records. And Dead Can Dance was a band that we kind of discussed with James Lindsay when we were first getting our record deal as just, just incredible. Like the drumming, like I think if you hear Heretic, Laya, and Savior, the songs that have a lot more kind of tom heavy drums, like that was like, I was listening to Dead Can Dance, but I was also listening to a British kind of modern classical group called These New Puritans. They kind of mix like modern electronics and almost like hip hop level production with orchestral arrangements and stuff. So yeah, I was listening to a lot of that. So we're kind of all over the place. But like, yeah, like I mean, like some of the ones you would assume, like, you know, like Echo and the Bunnymen we love, and the Smiths we grew up loving. And and then from there it's like there's different ones. Like I'm always trying to listen to a wide variety of stuff. So I grew up, like my parents had very eclectic taste in music. So I kind of keep it similar. I like keeping it moving. I'm always like, I'm kind of like, I'm a bit scattered in how I listen to stuff now, but those are the influences early on. And like the Sound, I think, is a really underrated post-punk band that didn't quite get the respect during their day that they deserve, because From the Lion's Mouth is a record that Sean and I listen to and still listen to constantly. And like the live record in the Hot House is really good too. It's cool hearing those sparse post-punk songs performed live. I think you really hear how punk influenced a lot of these bands were. And that's another genre that Sean and I bonded over too, is punk music and hardcore music. And even down to like how we do everything ourselves, I think is very much coming from just kind of like reading about, Husker Du and all, Bad Brains, and everybody who's just kind of like ran their own labels and made their own magazines and made their own vinyl sleeves. And like, it's the idea of like, if no one else is going to do it for you, we have to do it for ourselves. Right. Yeah. So we kind of like, I think that's it. Like, I think Sean and I kind of think of ourselves as like punks first. So that's kind of our very long answer of like who kind of like influencing more than just music too. It's just like, how you live your life and kind of your outlook and perspective on things too. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at too a little bit.
Yeah, you do things on your own terms. I mean, that's basically what I'm doing with this whole podcast too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good thing about living in this age, is technology makes it very easy to do that.
Yeah, it's true. And let me ask you, so, I mean, I know you consider yourselves a post-punk band, and I feel like, and especially with all the different bands that I've been talking to, and even just what I listen to, and I'm always kind of searching for new music. I'm just one of those types of people. But I feel like post-punk in some ways has become like a catch-all term for a lot of different types of music. And I almost feel like it's a little bit comparative to like new wave when it first came out, because there's a lot of different bands that you could group into the whole new wave movement that are a little bit different, but they all kind of fall into that category. And for me, I love the fact that I feel like post-punk is just the new term for new wave, because all of the bands that I currently really like listening to all fall under post-punk, if you like look at what their categorization is,
I agree totally, because I feel like it crosses a lot of like, post-punk, it influenced new wave, and it influenced early electronic music too. And early electronic music has a very punk epic to it as well, with just like, just kind of like just deconstructing sound altogether. So I love how interconnected those, from like even proto-punk bands like or krautrock, you hear those beats in electronic music, and I hear those rhythms in every kind of music. Like it really, I feel exactly the same way as you. I sometimes compare it to like film genres. Like a horror film could be something PG, kind of a more kid-friendly thing, or it could be something, exploitative, or it could be something, horrific, or it's just like there's such a wide range, and it's cool seeing what different artists and directors or musicians or filmmakers can kind of do with the rules that you have. Because we also get a lot of goth too. And like, honestly, like, I mean, I grew up like a goth as a teenager, but I don't really think of myself as a goth, or I don't think of us as a goth band. But that's a similar thing, where it's just kind of like the aesthetic of just like playing with dramatics and playing with kind of like, I don't know, tonally, I think those signifiers kind of cross a lot of different bands and genres. And I kind of like that. I hesitate to put us into any kind of a category, and this allows us sort of like, I can say we're a post-punk band the same way I could be like, I don't know, like we're not a noise rock band, I guess, but like it kind of like, it's specific enough but also gives us enough elbow room to be like,
well, it's like alternative, you know what I mean? Like you could say alternative too, because it's kind of the same concept. It's broader. The thing for me with post-punk, or even like, I guess like could say synth too, a lot of the post-punk stuff has synth involved in it, which is why I kind of liken it to the whole new wave thing, because new wave
totally.
is really just an answer to punk that made punk more palatable.
Yeah, I agree. I hear in a lot of, like, say, like actors to me is like a new wave band more than they're like, I always get whiffs of like Roxy Music and Brian Ferry and some of this stuff. It's fun to hear like every band, even though we're all technically kind of in the same genre or whatever, like Twin Tribes or, or who our other contemporaries are. It's like, I think everybody sounds so different. And that speaks to like how palatable that music is to different kind of aesthetic touches and things like that.
And, it's because you're all playing around with synth and electronic stuff, but you can do so many different things with that it has such a different sound. Because it's funny you bring up actors, because I actually just did an interview with them a few weeks ago. I listened to TRAITRS, I listened to actors, I listened to a variety of things. But I think the other cool thing that I've been noticing too is that a lot of bands from that whole, I don't want to say it's like a genre, but that kind of scene, they're starting to collaborate with each other, I'm seeing more often, which I also think is cool.
Yeah, I noticed, because we get to meet these people when we're playing shows, and everyone's so cool. Like, everyone's really friendly and everyone's really nice and welcoming. And even though you may have only met somebody once or twice, you feel like, I think just because we have this sort of intrinsically based in bond over what we do and how musicians live their life, the struggles we kind of have to deal with, it's like you feel like you know these people a lot closer than maybe you might in a time sense. But so I'm not in that sense, I'm not surprised that you see a lot of bands remixing other bands and working with them or performing songs live. Like our friends Then Come Silence and the Foreign Resort, they performed a version of Thin Flesh in Europe a few years ago, and we were home, and I woke up to a bunch of notifications like, did you see this? Did you see this? And it was really touching to see them kind of like play our track live. Like, I had no idea, they didn't tell us that. And it's like, it's fun because everyone's like, everyone's very friendly and very cool. And it's just like, if you're a nice person, that's kind of the thing that matters the most. We have some interesting collaborations coming up as well. We did a remix for Wingtips, which will be coming out next week. It was another Artifact band. So yeah, it's nice. I like it. I like working with other like-minded, arty, weird people. It's a nice perk of what we do.
I consider myself like, I don't know how to refer to myself really, but like I'm the cheerleader for all of these bands because I just love it. I just want to support it. I don't consider myself a musician. I can play some instruments, but I'm just really a music lover. So I'm happy to help support.
Thank you very much. We need the people like you. All the people like you we can possibly muster together.
I know.
But that's what I see it like everywhere though, like worldwide. It's like people are like, it blows my mind how many people are listening to not just our music, but just this scene, this group of bands out right now. Like, it's really cool. Like, it's literally all across the world. It blows my mind every day because my little humble life in Toronto, sometimes, you kind of feel like very detached from everything at times. And I'm kind of like, it's trippy. It's a bit of a mind fuck to think that, like, all these people are listening to our band and our friends' bands. Like, it's really wild.
That's the cool thing about the socialization of music and the digitization of music, because it makes all of that so much more possible. So, and we'll keep talking about the music that you guys are working on. So in 2021, you released Horses, and I don't know if I'm going to butcher this word, but Horses in the Abattoir?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that was in 2021.
It's a mouthful, that one.
Yeah. Can you kind of tell me a little bit about that album? So today, in honor of us doing this, I made the song Magdalene the song of the day. Which
nice. Awesome.
That's like more of like a reverb. It's got a lot of like reverb drums on it. It's a little bit darker. And then another song I like on that album is Mouth Poisons. I think that's a really cool song.
Those are two songs that we wrote overseas, actually, when we were on tour. So Magdalene, we were on tour. We did a run with Holy Graham, who's a really good German band from Cologne, who's no longer with us. Unfortunately, they called it a day. And then we did a Scandinavian run with the Foreign Resort and Then Come Silence. And we were in Copenhagen. We had some days off. And the Foreign Resort let us use their rehearsal space. They said, you guys you must have your creative juices all fired up because you're on the road for, like a month at that time. And we hadn't been home. And so when you play the same set every day, it's kind of, you don't get tired of it, but you're kind of like, you get itchy to like, we always kind of modify how we play things live to get us thinking about like the next thing we're going to work on. So yeah, we wrote 6 hours. The first thing we came up with was Magdalene. I was listening to this old 80s band, Naked Eyes, and they have a really good record, and the drum machine work on it is really good. So I was listening to that and being inspired while we're out. But yeah, so Yeah, and Mouth Poisons, we wrote in our friend Dominic's flat in Frankfurt. We kept him up. He said we heard our guitar strings going bling, bling, bling at like 4 a.m. as we're like quietly like going like, I think this is really good. I don't know what it is about this, but I think it's good. That's kind of, we always try to, Sean and I are very economical with the time we spend together. So I always have like a very kind of no frills kind of recording setup with us. I like to think of it as like sketching, like how artists, like visual artists sketch. It's kind of like how we start thinking about writing. So it's easy when we're together all the time, like you are on the road.
And so speaking of being on the road, at the end of this month, you start a European tour, initially supporting VNV Nation.
Yeah, that's wild. They approached us late last year about doing it. And it's really cool. Like these will be the biggest venues that Sean and I have ever played. They've been really nice and friendly to us. We're working with a lot of their tech and some of the merch manufacturers and stuff, and everyone is like super cool. And like, yeah, it's been really, I'm excited to like pick their brain and kind of like, learn. And it's an interesting new challenge for us to be playing like shows this big where we're going to be playing to crowds where I think, the vast majority of people will have no idea who we are. It's been a little bit since we've had something like that because we've been doing, we went to the United States for the first time last year, and we went to Mexico City for the first time last year, and it was like people were already kind of like knew who we were, which was really nice. So this will be cool. This is like it's like starting over a little bit, and it's fun to be able to every night have a new first impression to have to make on a bunch of people who have no idea who we are. And so we did some really good shows supporting She Passed Away in October, and She Wants Revenge in November for a couple dates, and I feel like those were good preps. Like those were bigger shows too, and those were other shows where a lot of people didn't know who we were. So it's kind of like it's fun. It presents a different kind of challenge than just doing your own kind of shows. So I'm excited for it, and just the experience of like this is our first experience like in a tour bus, like like just rolling around in a tin can is going to be kind of like I think about the Family Values tour and like Ozfest back in like the early 2000s, and like as a teenager I would have killed to do that, and to think that like I'm going to do it now is really cool. It's kind of it's nice for us on a number of levels.
Exciting. That's exciting. Get to experience that.
Yeah, it's a challenge for us. Sean and I have always we're ambitious. Like we've always kind of wanted to just like play for as many people as who want to listen to us. And that's the thing about these. It's always kind of like, I don't know how many people would like us. I think we deliver something that I think people are really connecting with now. And it's exciting that we can kind of take this confidence that we've been building in these smaller club shows and take them to these small theater shows and think that like, okay, like, we've been here before. And I think we're going to, we're excited. It's like, it's not like a competitive thing, but it's like, I think the bands in the scene are really good. And I think if given the opportunity to play with older legacy acts, I think the fans of the legacy acts will also really like the new bands because it's similar enough and it's good. Like everyone's really good and there's such great songwriters out there now. So we're excited. It's a lot of like, I'm like, there's a lot to mentally kind of go over, and I'm very scattered with how I kind of think. And it's a lot sometimes. It's a lot of like, at 4 a.m. trying to sleep, going like, don't forget this. Don't forget this thing. Like you're going to be gone for a long time. So it's exciting.
It's nerve-wracking too. So, I mean, like you guys have played in Europe before, right? So
yeah.
So this is just like a bigger version of that. And then after you're finished with VNV Nation, you're continuing on headlining yourselves, right?
Yes. Yeah. We go back home for a few weeks. We go at the beginning of April. We go home for about 3 weeks, and then we start April 27th, I believe, back in Hamburg at Hassenklang, which is a venue we've played at many, many, many times. It's kind of like it was one of the first stops we made on our very first European tour in 2017. So we're happy to come back. So it's a lot. This year is already shaping up to be a really busy one, and last year was too.
Right. So my question also, touring in and of itself is difficult, right? Because you're in so many different cities. You have to kind of maintain your health, maintain your mental health. There's a lot going on. Do you find that it's more difficult to be like in Europe and so much farther away from home than maybe North America? And is the experience essentially the same, or do you feel like there are differences?
No, there's definitely differences. Like just we've been to Europe a number of times that like things like say like like the language barrier doesn't bother us. And everywhere we go, like people speak English and
Yeah.
stuff. But sometimes it's more like reading street signs. And
Yeah.
you know, if we're driving on the autobahn, it's like the first fucking time we did that, I'm just like, we're gonna die. Like, it was like really
insane.
like it's a lot. Yeah, and it does like there mentally you feel really far away. Like just like the time difference, like keeping in touch with our partners and loved ones and friends back home can be like a little tricky because of that.
Right.
And you do feel kind of isolated, like it's just Sean and I. But we're very fortunate. Like we have a lot of really great, terrific friends that we've made in Europe, so we feel less alone there. And going to North America, the United States for the first time was really was fun. Yeah, it's like the crowds are definitely different, but they tend to be a little bit younger, I noticed, in the United States. But everybody is like, again, it's like everyone's like super cool. Everybody is like really excited to, you know, we were hearing a lot of like people saying like, oh, they've been waiting a long time for us to come over, like especially in like Los Angeles. So it's but the crowds are very. We played a festival in Tampa Bay called Absolution Fest, and it was a great festival. And Sean and I were sitting outside in the courtyard, and we were kind of just observing everybody just kind of like milling about. And we both were like, this feels like Germany. This feels like it could be Castle Party in Poland. It feels like it could be Owl and Bats Festival. Like it could be like any number of these festivals that we've played overseas and in Europe. So it's kind of like, it's nice. It's like they're very, and lots of people like, especially with the big goth festival, Wave Gothic Treffen in Leipzig, like there's a lot of people that travel from North America to go there. So a lot of people actually, a lot of Americans actually know people that we know through music overseas. So it's kind of like it really shrinks the world down.
It's funny how that happens. And that's, I think, one of the great things about music is that it evens the playing field and brings so many different people together of different backgrounds and everything else. And I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. It's great. I always feel like I feel so lucky to get to just feel that love from people. Like, you know, people are so excited to see us at shows, and they say really, really amazing things to us, and like telling us what our music means to them and everything. It's really for us, it's a good, like, it makes us feel really good to know that the way that other artists make me feel, I can provide a similar thing to people listening to our music. That's kind of like it's like a superpower. It's like the whole point of making music. So it's nice though. But it's like, the interconnection is really great. It's really again, it's like, it's mind-blowing to me how consistent everybody is, very friendly and nice, and you know, knows a lot about the music and the scene and the bands and stuff. So it makes for the shows are really great. The crowds on both sides of the Atlantic are really cool and really responsive and nice to us.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's a dream come true. I mean, like I grew up from pretty humble upbringing, and I didn't get to travel at all when I was a kid. I was counting with Sean, and we played. We played in 16 countries in the last 5 or 6 years, and it's like, I mean, I would never get to go to Hungary, I don't think, or the Helsinki, Finland, or Portugal, or any of these kind of cool places that we've been to. You know, seeing as much of Germany as we have, and like we played Paris like 4 times and stuff. Like, it's really, if I think about it, it's hard when you're in the moment. I think everything feels like it goes by so quickly. But if we just take kind of a pause, like I was doing over the holiday break, was just kind of like going like, man, like this is really, how fortunate we are to be able to go to all these places. And it's like, it fills me with such a good feeling when I come home. Like, I feel like I want to be more creative. I feel like I want to be like nicer to people. It's nice to pay it forward. And when the crowds do it to us, it's like, it's really quite cool. Yeah. It's nice. It's tiring at times being on tour all the time, but we always try to like see whatever we can and soak in as much of whatever city we're in as possible.
Well, because it's, traveling is cool, but traveling doing what you love to do is even cooler.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I feel like I grew up, like I said, like that's kind of what I wanted to do. I also I wanted to be a writer too. So I kind of was fascinated by, people going to Paris in the 1920s and like the modernist crowd, like the Gertrude Steins and T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pounds and these people that were just kind of like, just artists, just kind of like doing their thing and whatever. I was kind of like always fascinated by that and thinking like how cool it must be to be able to live a life like that, and to think that, I'm doing my own version of that, like 100 years later is like pretty, it's pretty, in a very nerdy way, it means a lot to me. So yeah, it's great. It's awesome. It's so cool.
So typical question that I kind of tried to close out with, that I ask everybody that comes on the show, is do you think rock music is dead? And by rock music, I mean there's all these different genres within that, but some people would say that it's dead. I personally don't think that it is, but I always like to get other people's perspective on that.
No, it's not. There's guitar in our band. Like, it's not dead. I know I hear that from a lot of older people. They're just like one of the when the all the bands were only good when I was a kid. Kind of older guys. Like I hear that, and it's sort of like there's so much music now. That's the problem. Like I think it's like there's terrific bands right now, but it's hard. It's overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed just being able to kind of stay on top of stuff. It feels like releases are coming out all the time. I don't have such fixed ideas of what music is kind of in my head. So I think that's just kind of how I am in general. Like I remember like when I was back listening in my more metal days, like if a metal band had a synth in it, it was like some people would be like, this isn't real metal. Like what is this? Like I don't know what this is. Like it's always like how do they use it? How are they using it? How is it working in tandem with everything else? Like, you know, like I don't like I said earlier in the interview, like I listen to a lot of, you know, variety of music and like I love hip hop and I like a lot of jazz music, and it's like it's how the artist is like expressing themselves. And it's like, you know, we did a festival in Austin, Texas with King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, and it's like, okay, this is like the most guitar and like the OCs, like these are like guitar band, like indie guitar band gods right now. So like, you know, and they were playing to pack shows and stuff. So it's like it's not dead. It might be like less popular right now, and it's like I don't know, it's like people's music tastes and how they listen to music has changed so much, and you know, artists are getting broken on TikTok now. Like even how we did things 5 years ago is not at all how you would start now, and I think that also plays into like what music you might hear. But like I don't know, like I think even in a popular sense, it's like I don't think guitar music is like dead or unpopular. I mean, it might be like less popular, but I don't think it's like gone at all. And it's just like these things, you know, like music and styles, like things come and go, and it fluctuates and trends change. But I think great art will just survive ideally. Like I think that's kind of how I sort of like to think of it.
Yeah, no, me too. I agree. So any other last things that you would want listeners to know about your band, or what else you all have? I know you're doing this European tour through May.
So I wish we have some cool things that will be coming out later this year that we can't say anything about yet. We are going to be touring in North America in the fall, but again, those dates are not announced yet. So, but soon. So I would just say, like us on Instagram is always helpful to kind of keep abreast of what we're up to. And it's at Traitors Official. And we got to promote these dates a lot. So that's probably the easiest way. And like, you know, I would just like to say also, like, if anybody listening to this saw us perform live last year, I would just like to say thank you for coming out. Like really the responses and the turnouts to a lot of these shows were really incredible to Sean and I, and a lot of these nights were like life-changing kind of events. So we really appreciate that. So you know, last year was a big year, and this year looks like it's going to be another biggie. So just thanks to everybody for listening to our music and for listening to this interview, and thank you for providing us a platform to discuss art. This was a lot of fun, and I like being able to kind of break this stuff down. It's something Sean and I like doing, so it's fun.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all the listeners. And yes, it's at Traitors Official on Instagram. Follow at Rock and Flux IG, and thank you again, Sean, for being here. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much.